bids are in, the gavel has dropped, the auction is over. Ladies and gentlemen, here at WineBid, we are finally hammered. My name is Jeff McGurn. With me, as always, is the illustrious wine auction expert, Paul Walker. I would argue he is a wine expert in general. He always rolls his eyes and shakes his head, but what I'm saying is true. Welcome to WineBid's weekly podcast, dedicated to all things wine value. And I do believe we're the only podcast that is just dedicated to finding good value in wines wherever they may lie, whatever price point, whatever type of wine. That's what we're all about here. And that's really the main thing that Paul and I care about, is finding great wines at a good price and helping you do the same. So welcome, Paul.
Welcome.
What are you drinking today?
Let's see. So today I am drinking, I don't know if you can see, but it's retro. This is Retro Petite Syrah from Howell Mountain from the Park Muscatine Vineyard. Mike Dunn's wines. He's been making wine up on Howell Mountain forever. He's a good buddy, and he's probably better known, I should say, for helping his dad make wines from his last name's vineyard label. But the retro wines that Mike does are really, really cool. He makes Petite Syrah, he makes some Syrah, he makes some Zin and some other things I'm forgetting, Pillar Sun, I think. And they're really, really good. And the old vine designations are excellent. They last for a long time. They're powerful wines. They're not shy, but they're really, really tasty. So that's what I'm having today. It's cold and it's kind of rainy out, so it feels appropriate.
I love a good old vine Zinfandel. I myself am having a Vincent Maury and Sophie Santenay, Le Gravé Premier Cru. Obviously, Vincent and Sophie are really good friends of mine, and love this stuff. Naturally, love the stuff that they produce. I use the term friend loosely, and I use the term really good friend even looser. But that aside, let's jump right into this. There's a lot to cover today. We've got a big stuff. We've got a big auction recap. One of the things that I want to recap, the stuff that had a lot of bids on it. Sure. One of the things that really jumped out at me was the diversity in the stuff that saw a lot of action at auction today, which I thought was really cool. Maybe the first time I think I've seen our top bid on had 13 bids was a 2008 Comte Lafon Meursault.
Right.
Really fascinating. Started at 90, sold at 160.
Yeah, you remember we talked about this, right?
We did.
I think I probably said something stupid like, "Oh, it'll go for around $100," you know.
Boy, were you wrong, Paul.
Obviously, I didn't look at all the other Lafon wines from 2008, but I'm sure they were probably more, you know, because there were Premier Cru wines as well, and I'm sure they all went for more.
I mean, like, it's funny because last week we're saying like, God, $90 is such a good deal for this wine. Well, as it turns out, $90 would have been a good deal for that wine if you had not mentioned it. And everybody goes, "Oh my gosh, I get this for $90."
Great value. Well, that's our tagline, right? It's like great values at the price where they start. At
the price where they start. Not necessarily the price they
How are they hammer?
But there were two sold at 160, so that's what it's worth. Number two was a 2009 Antica Terra.
And another one we mentioned. I said this is wild to see a full case of this wine. Somebody had a bid on it right at the start of the auction, and I didn't think it would actually get that many bids and that bid up, but it looks like the price went up substantially, especially when you consider it was a full case. So
12 of those, I mean, a 60 to 90, 12 bids.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of crazy to me. 08, Francois Rousset, Martine, Côte de Jura. I mean, this one, 12 bids.
This is one of this, you know, I'm totally ignorant about this wine and a lot of Jura wines for that matter, but it must have a following of some kind because it saw a lot of activity.
09 A&P Divalan, Bourgogne, Côte de Chalonnais.
Yeah, it's another one we recommended.
What? $20?
Yeah, $20. I was like, $20, great deal.
I mean, look, You spend $20 on like a Village, I mean like a brand new Village Burgundy. So I mean something like that is from the Côte Chalonnais, that's not crazy.
No, great vintage, great producer, ties to obviously Aubert de Villaine. Well, ties, I mean it's his winery. And still, I don't think that 36 for a bottle is bad. You skipped over the Boxer Pinot Noir, by the way. Did you notice that?
I did.
Got multiple bids. You probably got outbid on that.
More or less. What I did not skip over was the 06 Bruno Giacosa Nebbiolo d'Alba.
See, that was another one, that I knew was going to go. I wouldn't have expected it to go to almost $50, but that's not surprising at all. It's great producer. That's probably really tasty right now.
Yeah. 16 years, almost 17 years of age on that Nebbiolo.
Right. And the Barolo and Barbaresco will last a long, long time. And so this wine's probably tasting great right now. I didn't look up cellar tracker notes or anything, but I'm sure it's excellent and it's in good shape. And so that should be a great one. 2019
Mondavi The Estates Cabernet Sauvignon. I figured that was probably mostly you. Got 8 bids. I figured because you do all your wine buying by Wine Spectator's rating.
Top 10, yeah. If it's not a top 10 Spectator Top 100, I'm not interested in it at all.
Pretty much that's how Paul operates. Like that's all he buys is Wine Spectator Top 10 list. The next one was like near and dear to my heart.
Let's hear you massacre the pronunciation of this.
7 bids. Tonatore.
I thought you were going to talk about the de Villaine Rouilly, and I was waiting for
no. I'm talking about the Nerello Mascalese. Right. Which this is one that I had talked about. Right. We had this conversation with $20 is a phenomenal price for this wine. I'm a huge fan of Nerello. I don't feel like it gets enough play. And I love that it's getting some love because it's like a varietal that I have been obsessed with and you just don't see a lot in the United States. Started at 27 bids, got it to almost $50 for this bottle of Nerello. And this one, if you're looking at the cellar tracker notes, is singing right now. Like it's supposedly it's a fantastic bottle. I was at least one of those 7 bids. I think I was the first bid. I really wanted that bottle, but I did not get it, sadly, because at Wine Bid, we're not allowed to bid against customers.
Well, you got to place a big max bid to start with, and that's fair.
I was not going to place a $50 max on a $20 bottle.
If you really want it, that's what you got to do.
I didn't want it that much. I mean, I wanted it. I would have preferred if just nobody bid against me. 2013 Nervi Gattinara. That one, 7 bids, took it from 35 to 48. And this one just retails at 100.
Right. And it's funny because there were Nervi Conterno Gattinara, and then there were the just the straight Nervi Gattinara, and I don't know the difference other than Conterno is obviously going to change things as far as people's interest in it because of the famous name. But the 18 Magnum was another one that I wanted to point out because it started at 75, and I think there were 5 of them because we were talking about how there were, it was interesting to see multiple bottles, especially large format of this wine. Yeah. And not surprising that the case of 14 Nervi Conterno all sold, got multiple bids. I mean, it hammered just above reserve at $50, $51. So wasn't anything nuts, but the mags got bid up, I think, to about 130 starting at 75. So people went after those. They were obviously I feel like they were underpriced for auction, but the Mocino also got started at 35, hammered at 47, I believe. And then the one you just mentioned got bid up pretty substantially. So that was cool to see.
One there were a couple that I thought were really interesting that saw like a lot that like really saw a big jump. The JF Meunier.
We talked about some of the other Meunier wines because I think there was Amoreuse and Musigny in the same vintage, and the Village Chamel Musigny going from 195 to 340 that's quite significant. That's a lot of money for Village Shumble, but that's Meunier, and that's serious stuff.
We saw the 2002 Lucien Le Monet Poulinier
Montrachet. Follatière.
That's what I said. You get yours cleaned out, but that one, 6 bids took it from 80 to 130.
Yeah, see, great vintage, great vineyard, great producer. I guess great could be, argued about. Lemoine, I don't know how those wines are tasting 20 years down the road, but not something you can easily replace. And so the bidding reflected that. 2 bottles started at 80. Yeah, finally went to 130.
One that I thought was really interesting. I feel like we don't typically see a ton of action on Paso wines, but the 2017 Turtle Rock James Berry Vineyard, did I pronounce those correctly? That one, 6 bids. We had 3 bottles, went from 60 to 145.
Yeah, that was pretty significant. And I hate to jump the gun here, but did you look at all the Turtle Rock in the current auction?
There's a ton of Turtle Rock coming into auction right now.
It's like all of a sudden it was the teaser, lot of 3 bottles, and then the flood arrived this week.
Those 6 bidders were like, there'll never be Turtle Rock in the auction again. I better get this right now. I better get this now. When are we ever going to see Turtle Rock again? And then we opened up the Turtle Rock floodgates is what happened, right? That's how we do it here at WineBid, right? We trickle in one, and no, I'm just joking. And we put it in as it comes. And then a 2010, I'm going to butcher the name.
Yeah, I'll just say it for you. Arnaud Lachaud Echezot. And this wine bears sort of, I think, mention. I'm sure we've talked about it before, because this wine has become an auction darling, shall I say it? And the ownership, or I believe the vinification, changed in 2015 to Charles Lachaud, who's making the wines now, and the pricing for some of the new releases is astronomical. So I think finding or securing the 2010 Grand Cru Echezot, when there's literally Bourgogne Rouge for $800 or something, getting the 2010 Arnaud Lachaud Echezot for $415, 405 was not unrealistic and not overpriced, if I dare say it, even though it did start at 245. So that's interesting to see. The wines are not the same, as far as I know, as they are now, with different winemaking, but it's become a real cult producer, that's for sure.
I want to get into stuff that we're watching at auction, because there's a lot to talk about. Normally, what we do here is we look at just stuff that's coming new into auction, because anything else we've looked at. But before we do that, there is something that is not new at auction, but I did want to mention, because LiveX just came out with Lafleur's 2018 release price, Chateau Lafleur. So they just released I think it's the first tranche of 2018 Lafleur. People keep me honest. What's really interesting to me is the 2018 is like a tremendous deal. It was coming in at, I believe, I have to look at the price, but under $600 a bottle on Premier on this release, which, if you're looking at the Lafleur we have at auction right now, that stuff's going for, $900, $1,000 a bottle. So there's a lot of chatter, at least amongst the wine investing community. It's really fascinating, because you're not seeing, especially Bordeaux, giving a good deal on Premier, or even on first release. Like, this stuff usually comes out at exactly what the retail is going to be, if not even higher than what it ends up retailing for. So I thought that was particularly interesting to me.
Right.
But yeah, they're doing 5,800 pounds, Great British pounds per 12. So that's coming in, I think, $600 a bottle-ish, right around there.
Yeah, that's for the 18.
Yeah.
Wow. Because auction values on that are way more than that. So that seems really low.
That's what I was saying. And granted, you have to get an allocation of the 18.
Right.
You have to be on an allocation list. But man, if you're on an allocation list, that stuff should be snatched up like that. And then
that's ridiculously low, because it's going to be worth, well, it's already worth more than that at auction right away. So,
right, immediately. Let's talk some other Bordeaux. There were some really interesting ones. I saw an 85 Margaux that came into auction this week. 505 is starting price. Great bottle, right? The tasting notes are saying this one is just singing right now. Be a great birth year wine. And 505 for Margaux is just a fantastic price, right? I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I haven't had that wine in a long time. I think it kind of might be one of the, the first growth from the mid 80s that is steadily increasing in price. I think it's been kind of crawling upwards for a while now. I just wanted to take a quick look at, where it's been last few months, but in the last year or so, yeah, I mean, it was in the mid to high fours in early 2000 late 2021, and then jumped all the way up to 700 in May, but it's come down a little bit. 505 seems to be the consistent hammer the last few months, and it's not, I'd be interested to try that wine again. I don't think it's as good as the 1990 or some of the other vintages. I don't think it's as good as 83, but it'll probably steadily increase and gradually go up over time.
Look, the tasting notes are singing its praises, of course. As you always note, you really have to be careful about, who is giving those tasting notes.
Right.
Right. Because, you don't know if they're any good. Directionally, I think it steers me right for the most part. There's a 95 Leoville Las Cases that came into auction, 205. I think 205 is a fair price for a high quality producer. And I feel like Leoville Las Cases punches above its weight.
It absolutely does. We've mentioned it. I think we talked about 81s last week or a couple of weeks ago. And, the 82 is obviously very expensive because of the scores and the vintage and everything else. In 1990, same thing. It's over $400 for the 90, but the 95 that's a killer vintage, and I think will last for years, and probably drinks well now. And it'll continue to go up. I don't doubt, but 205 is not a bad reserve for that.
One I wanted to ask you about, 09 Chateau Pape Clement Blanc, $330.
Yeah, this is kind of in that camp of white Bordeaux that costs more than the red. And there's a few examples. I think Haut-Brion Blanc actually costs more sometimes than the red in certain vintages, just because it's, extremely rare. And if the bottle's in good shape, people are going to go after it. But did you say 95 or 05?
09.
09. Sorry, I wasn't listening.
2009 Pape Clement Blanc. What's really interesting to me is this bottle usually goes for like 135-ish. It did get a 100-point score.
Yeah.
And my question is like, that 100-point score is really carrying this bottle.
Yeah.
For a while. For a while now.
Well, yeah. We'll see how long that lasts. I mean, it's interesting to see. I don't know. That seems like a lot. That just seems like a lot to me. 330. I mean, it has sold at that, so it's not out of line. That's hammered, I think, at 330 a few times. I think even more.
I agree. Look, I'm not saying that's more than what it's worth. I was just a little surprised that we would see a price tag like this from a vineyard like a chateau like Pape Clement.
Well, that's the thing. See, like there's this kind of group of white Bordeaux, and I'm scrambling to find other examples where we can see some of the history that's similar. Smith Lafite Blanc, I wouldn't put it in the same realm, but in vintages like 09, where it gets really, really high scores, it's pretty expensive. I think the 09 last hammered at, 125. So not in the same area, but still the wine, I bet if you had, these 09s next to each other and maybe a couple other like Domaine de Chevalier Blanc, which arguably is not in the same region. So it's going to be a totally different style, but still it's funny to see some of these white Bordeaux that go for more than the reds. Yquem Y is an interesting example too. Obviously, it doesn't cost as much as the sweet wine, but it it is not cheap. And the higher the score, obviously, the higher the hammer.
To me, that's one of those things where it's like the Igrek makes sense to me that, okay, their dry white wine, it's going to be expensive,
sure,
but it's not really as expensive as sweet white wine. What's crazy to me is when you see a vineyard that is really known for world-class red wines, they come out with randomly a white wine, not randomly, but their white wine can sometimes eclipse the red wine in value. It's always kind of an interesting thing to me.
Haut-Brion and La Mission Haut-Brion Blanc are both actually good examples of that. I think, like, I was just randomly checking, and 15 La Mission Haut-Brion Blanc last hammer was somewhere in 400 and something plus. And I think the 14 reserve is six. The last hammer for the 14 was 675, and the 14 red. The 14 red, there's no way it costs $675.
I bet you're about to tell me.
I'm going to tell you. Let's see. 14 La Mission. Last hammer for the 750 at 14 La Mission was 205. So it's 3 times the price for the white wine.
Whoa. Okay. Any other Bordeaux that you want to cover?
Yes. Let me run through, and forgive me for scrolling endlessly, because I really did tag a lot of stuff this week.
A lot of Bordeaux coming into auction this week.
There is, there was a bunch of Lafite. What else was there? Lots of interesting things. I think actually it seemed like there was a fair amount of Lafite, more than almost any other producer. But give me a second. And if you want to bring up, was there any other Bordeaux that you were interested in mentioning?
The only other one that I would mention, there was a 16 Pontet Canet. 16 was a great year for Bordeaux. Mm-hmm. That an amazing bottle, even when compared to the 2009, and yet it's going for $70 less. Mm-hmm. 2009, Pontet Canet is one of those ones where for years you could get it at sub $100, right? And now it just seems to have really, with 2019 on Premier notwithstanding, it seems to have really crept up above. But to me, 135 for 2016 Pontet Canet does seem like a pretty reasonable deal, especially for something that's in a drinking window right now, and that's a particularly good year.
Yeah, it's true. The only reason I kind of grimace at that price is because Pontet Canet used to be very inexpensive.
Right. Well, right. It did used to be very. I mean,
I feel like there's some counterparts to it that have slowly crept up in price, but not as nearly as bad as Pontet Canet. So,
Lichbage.
Yeah, I mean, Lichbage is eclipsed in certain vintages, definitely in the 2000 vintage, but. No, you're right. I mean, it's good. That's not insane. It's not like other examples, but it still seems like a lot. I guess I'm just stuck in the 90s or something.
But back when you were buying, in the 90s, in the 80s, when you were buying Pontet Canet for like $3
for $29.99 or
so, for sure.
Yeah, no. I was going to mention, since we were talking about Haut-Brion Blanc, I was going to mention the Haut-Brion Rouge. The 1990 is in this week, new bottle or new item, and it's at $870. I always felt like this wine's been totally overshadowed by the 89, which is, one of the world's greatest wines. And so the price is $870 reserve, which is far less, not almost half actually, of what the 89 is going for. And that's always kind of fun to see because it's phenomenally good. I haven't had it quite a few years, but amazing example, just a killer vintage all around. There were so many great wines from Bordeaux in 1990. And so that was a fun one. And then there's also 1990 L'Herve Barton at 190, which again, talking about prices going up. However, this is, more than 30 years old. So 190, I don't think is out of range, and it's great wine, and the bottle looks to be in really great shape. And so those were the two that stuck out to me this year, or this week, excuse me. The others I wanted to briefly mention there's some 88 Chateau Trotanoy, which is always sticks out to me because it's fairly rare. It's small production. It's Merlot. from Pomerol, and it's a lot less. It's sandwiched between Lafleur Petrus and Le Pen. And so it's a lot less than all of those by a mile, many miles.
Oh, right. That's not saying much. Not
saying no, 150
You're
for
less
the
than
88.
Petrus and Le Pen. Like, yes, everything is.
Yeah, I mean they're astoundingly higher than $150 reserve. So
yeah,
there's a couple bottles in for 150. I expect it to probably hammer at that, maybe not too much more. And so that's always sticks out as something interesting and collectible, but not insanely expensive. And then to counteract that, I will mention there's a magnum of 64 Petrus in this week, which is a whole lot more than 150. The 64 Petrus is at 52.50 for a magnum. So go figure. And it's
a steal. A steal. And isn't that your birth year, Paul?
I wish that I could tell you to get it for me. It's like, come on.
If only.
Pony up.
If only. Let's talk Burgundy. There wasn't a ton of Burgundy coming into auction new this week, but there were a couple bottles that sort of caught my eye. Mm-hmm. We kept talking about Le Flave, that a Puligny Montrachet, 04 Le Fleuve. That's what I said. 325. Solid notes, great producer. Do you think 325 is a good value for this Puligny Montrachet?
Well, I don't think anything is good value in Le Fleuve anymore. I mean, it's absurdly expensive now. The wines are incredible, and they are sort of the benchmark, if you will, for these various vineyards that they source from. They're amazing wines. I did see that because that stuck out. It's like, because I always look for Domaine Le Fleuve wines every week, but yeah, that's a great example. Not sure about great value, but it's, that's what you got to pay for that stuff these days.
Well, I mean, you look at it, this bottle first hammered in 08 for $120. Mm-hmm. It last hammered in September of 2021 for $245. Before that, it was $175 in April of 2021. So, you're $325.
You say it was $175 in April of 21?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite an increase.
I mean, you're talking about a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half, and it's almost doubled in value. And we don't know what it's going to hammer at. So it could theoretically go for more than 325. Theoretically, it could not go at all, and it could end up coming down.
That's true, because there is quite a bit of Le Fleuve in right now. Some of it's been rolling over. I think it's very expensive stuff, and people aren't ready to pull the trigger right now. But
the other one that I was looking at, there's an 09 Chanson Corton Charlemagne, and that one $85. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure about the age. I mean, there could be some age issues there, but certainly $85 for Corton Charlemagne struck me as a pretty good deal.
Yeah, that thing looks great. Color looks fantastic on it. I wouldn't be worried about age there at all. I think this bottle's in fine shape, and not too familiar with the Chanson wines, and the price is, I think, reflective of how it's treated, let's say, in the secondary market. It's more kind of along the lines of Latour and some of the other bigger name negociant producers of Corton Charlemagne. Don't forget, that's a enormous parcel of land that the entire place is Grand Cru, the red and the white. So it's a little funny that way, and things could be discussed, depending on people's opinions of the area in very many different ways. But you're right, for Corton Charlemagne from a great vintage, that's a good value. That's what you're talking about.
And they produce 1/3 of the Grand Cru Burgundy.
What do you mean?
Corton Charlemagne.
Oh, Corton. Yeah.
Corton produces 1/3 of Grand Cru.
It's a big parcel.
Huge, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like Clos in that sense, where it's this massive Grand Cru vineyard, and the quality varies quite a bit by parcel, and so you got to do your research as far as what's good. Jancis Robinson gave it 17.5, so that's a pretty darn good score.
If you're looking at sort of the notes on Solar Tracker and some of the rankings, it is highly regarded, right? Mm-hmm. Like it gets fairly acclaimed. Granted, I mean, these are random people saying this stuff, but I don't know. I found there's a degree of there's a degree of accuracy there, at least correlation.
No, I was going to say, it looks like the two reviews for that wine were both from the same critic on Cellar Tracker. So you gotta take that with a grain of salt.
Well, they're actually, if you look at the community score, oh, you're right. 2 out of 3 are from the same critic. Take it with a grain of salt. That being said, I mean, look, $85 for a bottle of Corton Charlemagne. I don't think
it's not bad. Great. It's not bad. It's a great. I trust Jancis Robinson's score more than Cellar Tracker, and she gave a great rating. I don't know when that was done, but probably somewhere around 2012 or 2011 or something. But still, that's good.
What are you looking at Burgundy wise? I mean, walk me through some of the stuff that you're watching coming out auction.
Sure. Yeah, because I'm all over the map here this week. There's a lot of different stuff, a lot of domestic stuff. So I will kind of skip through if I can. There is some really great Chablis from Alice and Olivier Damour, which are not often found. So I always like to point these out. There's some Montemilieu 17 and 18, $75 reserve for both. And there's some 18 Vaudevet at $70 reserve. Those are great wines. As I said, they don't often come up. So always fun to see those. Let's see, in the red area, there is a bottle of 1995 Dugat P Mazy Chambertin Vieilles Vignes at $5.50. Fantastic producer. Great vintage, hard to find. I don't think it's been in for a while. It's probably not going to come back anytime soon. That's not cheap, but it's Mazy Chambertin from Dugat P. It's never going to be cheap. Let's see. If you don't mind, if I kind of shoot down to Beaujolais really quick.
I was like, yeah, let's go into other reds. Let's take a step outside of Northern Burgundy and let's talk about the other stuff.
Yeah. So there are. Well, there's quite a few interesting things. I noticed that, again, apologize that I'm scrolling through, and we can probably edit out this time-wasting chatter.
Well, how about this? While you're scrolling through, I noticed there was a ton of Chateauneuf du Pape that came in.
There's a huge amount of it.
I'm a huge CDP fan.
Well, yeah, you got a grip of stuff to pick from this week.
There's a ton of stuff. There was a 07 Boucassel. We have 16 of those. 105. That's an awesome 07 Boucassel. That's an awesome Boucassel. I've had that Boucassel. It's outstanding.
Okay.
I actually think I still have a bottle. 105, I think, is a fantastic price for that. It's drinking phenomenally right now. We've got 16. To me, that one's right for, I mean, that one should go for the 05. If you like Chateauneuf du Pape and you're in that price range, that's a great one to get. There was also, I mean, a bunch of other CDP. There was a Grand Vigneur, Chateauneuf du Pape, L'Original, L'Éclat du Calot. We had 2 of those, 2010, 2012. Both of them in the drinking window. Amazing bottle, great price points. The 2010 Grand Vigneur, that one 55,
right,
for a CDP with 12 years on it. I think is great. And then the L'Éclat du Calot,
Caillou, yeah,
Caillou, that one 140 for the 2010, and then for the 2012. It's 70. I think
that's so funny. I put both. I've tracked both exactly those same wines, the 2010 and 2012, because it's half the price.
It's half the price. It's like half the price for 2 years later, and it's still a phenomenal bottle, right?
Yeah.
10 years of age on it. I'll bet that's going to be. I mean, and by the way, Chateauneuf du Pape, what a great time for CDPs to come into auction. Like for all these CDPs come to auction, just in time to buy them for holiday meals, because. For me, that stuff pairs. I know everybody goes Pinot Noir. I actually love a good Chateauneuf du Pape with a holiday meal, especially with some age on it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And both of those wines will be delicious. I think the 12 might even drink better out of the gate right away than the 10. The 10 obviously, again, we're talking about scores before. It's pretty much, I think, why that wine is at 140. I actually tagged the 05 too, because that's a great bottle of wine, but it got the dreaded 100-point score, which means it's at $180 reserve. So, you should try all three together and see which one you like best. But I'm sure the 12 will be fantastic. So that's that. It's got a bid on it already, so you can see people are interested in the value.
So there is another Chateauneuf du Pape that is an auction that we rarely see in auction from this negociant. And I know you are obviously the French expert. Correct me if, please correct my pronunciation.
I wouldn't say expert, but yeah.
I'm going to butcher this. 2015, am I saying this right? Kirkland signature. Kirkland signature Chateauneuf du Pape Cuvée de Nance. I looked this up.
Now that you didn't pronounce right.
That one. Okay, Kirkland. Am I pronouncing
Kirkland? You got that. It
is not often that we see Kirkland at auction on WineBid, but just goes to show you we are not pretentious on WineBid.
That's true. We don't cherry pick. That's true.
We don't cherry pick, right? Which is
now is there? Do you know if the papacy is moving to Costco? That's the next question, because this would imply such a thing.
I mean, certainly they get a great deal on hot dogs and a soda. Let me just say, this one took me down a little rabbit hole, because I went and looked and I'm like, how often do we see Kirkland items at auction? The first time was in 2011. We saw a bottle of 03 Kirkland Signature Polyak. That was the first time we ever had Polyak. That's what I said. But anyway, I just want you to know, Paul,
I can't help myself. Sorry.
I will not bid on this 2015 Kirkland Signature Chateauneuf du Pape.
Well,
it's all yours, buddy.
This is the thing, right? It's a good vintage, and I don't know the wines from Cuvée de Nalice, from wherever the fruit source is, but I'd be willing to bet it's probably fine. This is a perfect example of something to bring to a 2015 Chateauneuf tasting. These are always awesome. If you're in a blind tasting group, which is great, where everything is bagged and only you, the guest, knows, and some of them people, they bring the bottles, and then the host takes them all. So even the guests don't know, which wine they're serving. And so sure. you can do any number of different ways of blind tastings, but this is an awesome example where you can find, the truth comes out, as it were, or whatever personal preference, people have for this type of wine. So that's what I would buy this for. I would absolutely buy it for a 2015 Chateauneuf tasting, or even not a blind, even if people are drinking, let's say, bannered producers from 15, and you just bag this one and bring it to a dinner or tasting, it would be awesome to see how now it might be terrible.
I know, right?
In which case, then you're not going to get invited back, but it still would be fun to try, right? Especially in that environment.
$20. There was, we have a 99 Gugal Côte Rôtie.
Oh yeah, I flagged these guys. Yeah,
I mean, Gugal puts out some great stuff.
Right.
The tasting notes are treating it very kindly. Côte Rôtie, phenomenal wine, and 150. I thought that was a pretty good deal for a Côte Rôtie.
Right. So I flagged all the Côte Rôtie from Guigal because the two famous Lalas, as they're called, well, there's three, but there are two famous ones in the auction currently. The 99 Dampuy is not a Lala, but it's the most reasonable of the higher end Côte Rôtie that Guigal makes. There's an 09 La Landonne at $450 and a 95 La Turque at $425, which they're phenomenally good wines. Guigal is obviously a giant, let's say, in the Rhone, with lots of different wines and lots of different quality levels and price levels. But the Côte Rôties from these particular destinations are fantastic. So, yeah, those are always great to see, and they don't come up that often, especially mid 90s La Turque. I mean, that's serious wine.
I've always had good luck with Guigal.
I mean, the Chateauneuf is okay. They make a ton of it. You can always find it. But yeah, there's a lot of great quality, I would say, for, across the board.
We have a 1990 Paul Jaboulet Année Hermitage La Chapelle.
Oh, is there 90 La Chapelle? I didn't see that. Is that new this week? I didn't see
new this week, 465.
Yeah, I mean that's a 100-point wine. So there you go.
465 doesn't seem unreasonable to me. One that, and actually, I don't know why I put this under here. It should have been under Bordeaux. A 2000 Garrard La Rose.
I saw that too. That's so funny. I noticed that as well. Yeah,
135. Yeah. I love the Chateau for a second growth. I feel like this is a second growth that I never hear anybody talk about, and yet every time I have a Garrard La Rose, I'm like pleasantly surprised.
No, it's serious wine, and I think it's only a matter of time before it gets pushed into, I think, a higher price point. I wouldn't doubt that 2000 and 09 and some of the other serious vintages will go to 150 and 200 as the years go by, because it's really, really good. It's really good. I had the 2000. So I think we talked about this before, but I had the 2000 out of Magnum a few years ago, and it was killer. It was really, really good. So I can't imagine that it hasn't peaked or anything. So that's a great wine.
It's a phenomenal wine. I've had a bunch of Garrard La Rose from the 80s. It is outstanding.
It's really good.
And yet consistently it seems to come in way below other second growths.
The 10 is at 80, right? And that's a great vintage too. It's not as good as, I don't think, 09, but still that's not expensive for wine of that quality.
That is a phenomenal.
The 15's at 70. So
$70 for a second growth. Look at the other second growths. You're looking at $150 to $200.
Right, easily. And then far beyond for serious vintages or
for series vintages, far beyond that. Basically, this Garrard La Rose, you compare this to like a Pontet Canet or Lynch Bages, which I believe are seventh or fifth?
No, fifth. Yeah.
Fifth growth. Sorry. They're fifth growths, which punch above their weight. Don't get me wrong. But my only point is, you're looking at paying a similar dollar value for a second growth. That's true.
Garrard La Rose is great. That's funny you mentioned that, because that definitely stuck out and when my travels through all the new wine this week.
We've got a Domaine Tempier Bandol.
Yeah, more Tempier. I thought of you again, actually, because I saw more new Tempier pop up.
You thought of me and not John Malkovich?
Not John Malkovich.
Not John Malkovich. That's the urban legend that we have, that John Malkovich loves Domaine Tempier. I swear to you, I saw him say that on a Reddit Ask Me Anything, a Reddit AMA.
You could probably look it up fairly quickly, but I'm just too lazy to do it.
That one, $60. 9 years of age. I love this producer. It's a great price for Domaine Tempier. And then this one, I am reticent to even mention it because I want to buy it. It is 1966 Rivrac.
I saw this and thought of you as well. We talked about Reef Salt and how much of a deal they are for old vintages.
It's such a good, and look, here's the thing.
Well, you miss it. It's already got a bid. So it's
me. I bid on it.
Oh,
that's me.
So I can outbid you because we're both employees. So
that's not me. That's not me.
Oh, it's not you.
It's somebody else.
Well, you better change your handle name because I'll out
you. You're gonna look up my handle name.
Well, I can see it. I mean, anybody can see it. We're talking about it. It's Jeff MA6 for all those people listening.
No, that's another Jeff Mack. You
shouldn't have the fraction of your name as your handle, by the way. It's not a good idea.
Have you had River Salt before?
Yeah, we talked about this. It's so amazing. And the bottles, they sit in oak forever. And it's like it's not recognized like other old sweet red wines. I think Banyuls is probably somewhat close.
Banyuls is close, but did I tell you there's this? I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. I apologize. There's this story, and I think it's from Windows. I'm going to butcher this story, but from Windows on the World, and the Kevin Zraly's book. He talks about. I think this is his book. He talks about like going to Dichem and sitting down for dinner where they did a tasting. For the first course, it was like a 12-course meal or whatever. And for the first course was, mushroom soup, and they served in Dichem, and it was amazing. And second course, it was like truffle risotto, and they served
Right.
the Kim. It was amazing. And third, so all the way through the Kim, and the very last course was dessert. It was some chocolate cake or some decadent dessert, and they served a bottle of a glass of Lafite, and he drank Lafite, and he's like, "This is terrible. Why would you serve this?" And he goes, "See, Sauterne goes with everything. Bordeaux only goes with one thing. It only goes with one thing, right? It's only good with meat." I think River Salt was that was sort of opened my eyes, because when I drink River Salt, I have it with a whole meal, and
Sure.
it pairs so well with so many different things. You want to go,
Yeah, that's true.
you want to go with something savory, like
Right.
it really is a versatile wine with a lot of age on it. $85 for a 1966.
Yeah, that's what's cool is you can find, birth year, anniversary, or whatever the reason bottles that are not, horrifically expensive.
Talk to me about your other French.
Okay.
Take me to Beaujolais. Oh.
So the first thing I want to mention is one of my favorite champagnes, Cédric Bouchard. We talked about it before. Great wines. The Val de Vilaine, there's a case of the 2020. There's a 6-pack, it looks like, of Les Ursouls 18, Discours 2022. So these are new releases, obviously. And there's a 17 Les Ursouls as well. Fantastic wines. They've got a lot of press. They've got a big following. The prices are high, therefore, but still great. I noticed there was some 98 Charles Joguet Chinon, Les Varins du Grand Clos, and that's a great producer of Loire Cabernet Franc. I'm not the biggest fan of Loire reds or even that many of the whites, but it I think bears mentioning just because we don't see them that often, and especially something from 1998 is always fun to see. There's speaking of nearby regions, there's a 1999 Chateau des Pieux Savinier Cuvée Spéciale, which is a pretty rare wine. I believe this is Chenin Blanc. Somebody will definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a cool bottle. Looks like it's got a couple bids on it. It's at $27 now. But anyway, that was fun to see. Oh, we skipped over a couple. For some reason I didn't notice, but there was an 05 Magnum of Chateau Pichon-Baron at $335. 3 of them actually.
That's a great price for a mag.
$335 for a mag that'll last for years and years and years. I always love large formats. I'm always looking at them. They're going to last longer. You're not going to open one on any given Tuesday by yourself, so they tend to last longer in your cellar too. There's an 18 available at $165, which I didn't think was crazy. The Wine Enthusiast gave it 100 points. Maybe that doesn't carry the same weight as a Parker or a Spectator 100, but who cares, right? It's still a great wine, and 165 for that for a current vintage is or let's say current release is not great, and you can put it down for years and years. Let's see, skipping on here. Interesting bottle popped up completely out of the blue, a 1999 Domaine Arlo Maurice Saint-Denis Les Ruchots Reserve Cuvée Unique. And it has a $39.99 price tag written on the label. So the retailer wrote it on the label, and that probably wasn't even released. That was probably like years after release too. But anyway, it's at 76. It's got a bid on it already, which is not surprising. That's a phenomenal red Burgundy vintage. So finding those cool examples from second or third tier, or whatever you want to call it, producers for under $100 is always fun. It'll be interesting to see what that hammers for. We might see that in our recap next week with a lot of bids on it. We were talking about Chateauneuf. I noticed there was a Saint-Cyprin 09 at $30. It has some great ratings. I was like, this is, it's a great producer. It's not expensive. That's a great Chateauneuf example. Skipping back to the Loire, there's Domaine de Beaumard Carte de Chaume, which is amazing Chenin Blanc. If you've never had it, the 04 was a great vintage. Again, it got great scores, if that matters. $50. I think that wine is always sort of consistently underpriced. It's very collectible. It lasts for years and years. It's very complex. It's very, very good. So that was cool. Let's see. Georges Meunier, Echezot, 2019. don't see too much of this. It's extremely collectible with price to match. It's at $8.75, but those wines are just unbelievably good. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's some Guy Berthaud from the Loire. I have a lot of Loire picks, which is kind of funny when I was just talking about how I don't really drink that much of them. And
not a big Cab Franc fan, huh?
No, well, I mean, I like it, but I don't drink a lot of Chinon. Let's just say that. But there's always cool examples, and I'd like to point out things that other people might enjoy more. So 2020 Guy Berthaud Saumur Blanc, Les Moulins, and then there's also the Saumur Rouge, and both at $40 reserve. And those are sought after, kind of a cult following. They don't come up very often, so those are always cool to see. We mentioned the Clos de Cailloux, Chateauneufs, and the price difference. There's some pretty amazing Cornas from Noël Verset. Prices are insane, but the wines are very rare and very sought after. There's 94, 95, 97, 98, 99. There's a mag of 2000 for $11.70. You don't see mags of this wine very often. That's a very collectible bottle, and all the way up to 01 as well. We were talking, oddly enough, Jeff, you'll recall, we were talking about our new Von Romani wine. We were talking about a rare bottle a couple of weeks ago from the 80s. There happens to be a magnum of 2000 Von Romani Les Souchaux in this auction, which I thought was fun to see. Again, large formats, rarity, interesting, collectible, lasts forever. That's at $7.50. I thought that was striking. Let's see, quickly moving on. We mentioned the Guy Gall wines, and we mentioned, let's see, there's some great champagne. There's some, in addition to the Bouchard wines, there's Georges Laval Brut Nature, 2015 at $130. That was one that stuck out with me. And yes, that's right. There's some Jean Foillard Morgon. There's this cuvee, pie cuvee, if you will, it has a pie symbol on the label. Cuvée 3.14. It's very, very collectible. We've got the 13, a couple bottles in at $210. We also have the 16 Foillard Morgon Éponyme at $50. And then skipping down to the Rhone, there is a Jean-Louis Chave Saint-Joseph Clos Florentin, which you don't often see this. We do often have the Chave Hermitage, but the Saint-Joseph is, well, let's just say it's generally less than, or quite a bit less than the Hermitage, but the 17 Clos Florentin is at, well, it looks like it's got a bid. It was at 165, and I think they're both at 166 now. That's cool stuff. High points, collectible. Everybody knows about it at this point, but still great wine. And there's some older Krug in this week, which I thought was really neat. That. 82, 895. There's an 85 Magnum for 1510. There's some other vintages.
95 for 495. Let's head across the pond. Let's come to the United States.
Oh, back. Okay. Well, hold on. Let me mention one more thing.
One more thing.
I know I'm just going on and on here, but there's just a lot of cool stuff. There's a wine that we had talked about because I was struck by this producer called Les Oreilles, and it was a Pernod Vergelès. Well, this week there's 2020 Les Oreilles Bourgogne le Vieux Sage, which is, it's Bourgogne, and it's very, very sort of esoteric, as it were, but don't often see it. I wanted to point it out because it's kind of one of those one-off examples. It's already got a bid. It's at 165, and I wanted to make mention of that just because it's a producer I'm not familiar with, but it's got quite a following.
Okay. As we head across the pond, there is something that I think I would probably be interested, but I think you might be interested in. I know you're not a fan of Caymus recently. We had some older Caymus come into auction this week.
Yeah, I did see it.
81 at 135.
I did see it.
And then there's a 94 special selection at 205.
That's not terrible. That's not a terrible price for 94. That's my cutoff year for Caymus.
Well, and then here's the other interesting. There was I've never even seen one of these. I'm sure you have, a 2012 Caymus Zinfandel, which I thought was kind of.
Yeah, no, I did see that. How much is it? I didn't even notice.
It wasn't even all that expensive. Let me take a look here. But
I guess I could look it up while I'm sitting here while you're talking.
Yeah, $50.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
I thought that one would be really interesting to check out.
Yeah,
it's
got a bid too, so somebody wants it.
Somebody's interested, and it came as Infidel. There were some interesting Harlans that came into auction.
Did you notice there's like every wine produced by Bill Harlan in this auction? There's there's Penultimate, there's Mascot, there's Bond, and there's obviously, and then what's the other? There's one more. Oh, Promontory. All of them. They're all in. Yeah. Tons of Harlan, actually. There's all kinds of vintages. Original Woods, and then there's the Maiden and multiple vintages.
A lot of Maiden in the auction. There was one that's jumped out at me, a 94 Joseph Phelps Insignia for $235.
I saw that too. Yeah.
I thought that was a cool one. That one has really strong tasting notes. We've got a lot of 90s Insignia that came into the auction this week.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot. You're right. There's a lot of Insignia. And I think I didn't notice if there were any other, it didn't seem like there were any other designations. Like there wasn't any Bacchus or Isley from Phelps. It was just the Insignia. Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot. Was there a mag of 95 or something? I can't even remember.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was like a Joseph Phelps boy band. I mean, they were all there, and it was very 90s.
Yeah, 95. No, there's a 3 liter of 95.
3 liter of 95. What is that going for?
At 870. Yeah, I mean
that's not unreasonable for a 3 liter of Insignia.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot. The 94, 235. I'm not too surprised at those prices, but yeah, for a big format, it's not exponentially more than the 750. It's a great deal, as it were.
One that I was really interested, I may have bid on. Maybe I did bid on it. 2013 Ridge Estate Merlot. This one I thought was really interesting because 2013, great year for Ridge. I believe the Montebello got like 100 points in 2013, but 2013 was there were a lot of great wines produced in Northern California.
Yeah.
It's 100% sourced from Montebello.
Yeah.
Which, as we all know, is a storied vineyard. That Merlot, no doubt, goes into Ridge Montebello. So I thought that one was a really cool one. And for $45,
it's funny. Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair price. I'm sure it's more at the winery, I wouldn't doubt. And I wanted to mention, because I'm a huge fan, there's also the 14 Estate Chardonnay, which is again from Montebello. I love this wine. It's a little confusing because, and I'd have to go to the website or to somebody who knows what they're talking about, but there's Montebello designated and then Estate designated Chardonnay. I don't know what the difference is. I suspect it might be vine age, but both are phenomenal. And the 14 Estate Chard at 45 Reserve, that's great Chardonnay. Santa Cruz Mountains is an amazing place for Chardonnay, and that stuff is really, really good. So I was stoked to see that too.
I'm a huge Ridge fan.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know that I've ever tasted. I mean, you probably have because you've got a lot more experience than I do. I don't know if I've ever tasted a bad bottle from Ridge. I feel like everything I've ever had from Ridge has been like really good. I saw a 91 Mondavi Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yep, I saw that too.
135, strong tasting notes, drinking great right now, good price point. And I've had older than that, and the Mondavi still drink fantastically.
No, we talked about McDonald last week and how insane the 2010 went. And the important thing I think to remember is that some of the greatest wines that Tim Mondavi was mostly responsible for in obviously Robert before that, but 69 Mondavi Cab, and then the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, those wines from the McDonald parcels and other parcels of To Kalon are just amazing, and they age really well. They're creeping up in price, and they're not going to be, I don't think they're going to be at 135 forever. And you can see when you look at the 78, for example, it's very expensive, but 91 is killer. And yeah, they're great. I love those wines.
Talk to me for just a moment here. We've got a 1967 Heights Martha's Vineyard at auction right now, right? Actually, we have two of them. This bottle last sold in 2022, in September, $460. Now these one, I mean, it sold for more before, but we've got two at auction right now, $855. Now, I know, the 1974 is iconic because that's the one that went to Judgment from Paris. So there's some history around it.
No, 74 didn't. That was too late. It was 70 or 71.
70? Oh, maybe it was 71. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I meant 71. It was 71 that went there. But we've got a 74 at auction right now, which rivals it in terms of tasting notes and is less than half the price.
Right. I don't know why. I think 60s Heights is just going to be expensive no matter what. I think the 68 is better. It's a better vintage, but 67, 855, that seems a little steep to me because that's quite a jump from where it last hammered anyway. Actually, no. Sorry, it hammered for more than that before. So I don't know. It's
been up and down. It's
been up and down.
It's hammered as high as 945, right?
67.
The 67 hammered at 945 in January of this year.
And then one hammered at 460, but it was a mid-shoulder fill. So it depends on condition, obviously.
Condition is playing huge into this. Don't get me wrong. I love Heights. They make phenomenal Cabernet Sauvignon. I just thought it was really interesting to see something like this. There's such a big swing depending on bottle variability. The other one that I thought was really interesting, speaking of Napa in the 60s, the 68 Inglenook Cabernet Sauvignon Cask H12. That one we've got at $370. Let me just say, I have had this bottle. It is outstanding. And I've also had the 67, absolutely outstanding, right? And this is one where it was kind of unclear, but the research I've done shows, so they sold the vineyard in 65, 66, and 66. It's unclear because my understanding was Philip Tongi.
Yeah, we had some mention of his wines in last week, but yeah.
He oversaw it, and my understanding was he continued to oversee it even after the vineyard was purchased. But these are some storied wines because Inglenook, especially in the early to mid 60s, was producing just some top quality wine out of Napa.
That's true.
So to me, 370 seems like a fantastic deal, especially when you juxtapose it against the 67 Heights.
I think these Inglenooks will creep up in value because, especially 68, it's killer vintage for California, very collectible. Obviously, Heights and BV and some other examples are very, very expensive, more so, I think, than this. And obviously, Heights is. But yeah, no, that's a great bottle. Even though the label's kind of shredded, it's great fill. Looks like it's into the neck, in fact, and looks really, really solid. So that's a really cool find. It's funny you mentioned this because speaking of terroir that is, I would say, comparable, there's also a bottle of 91 Dominus which is very much one of the best bottles of wine I've ever had. And
really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. And it comes from the Napanook vineyard, which is obviously there, it's seated down there in Yountville, and it's really, really, really good. So I had to kind of mention that as a segue.
Are you? Is that one you're going after then?
No, it's too expensive. It's at $420. Does it have a bid already? I don't think so. The label's stained, so people probably might shy away from it because it looks like something might have spilled on it. But the bottle itself is in phenomenal shape. So
no bids.
No bids.
Yeah, the color looks good, and it's got a good fill.
Yeah, that's just incredibly good wine.
I saw a L'Aventure for her.
Oh yeah.
Which 2013. So L'Aventure has wine for women now, apparently. $80. Look, I like L'Aventure. It seems like a good price to me. I just thought it was funny because it was for her.
Well, I don't know. There's got to be I'm sure there's some verbiage on the website that is, describes why the label is what it is. I don't think they're trying to be provocative.
I don't think they're trying to be provocative. I just thought the way it came off as I was looking at it, I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, while you mention L'Aventura, and we like to talk, it seems like we talk about it every week, but there's a whole bunch of Paso Robles wine in this week.
Yes.
If I can skip through those, because
please.
Like I said before, like I had tons of stuff to mention from all over the planet.
Look, we can put this stuff in the show notes. So if there's anything that we can't get to, here, we can put it in the show notes.
Sure. So there's Villa Creek. I've heard it pronounced Villa Creek and Villa Creek, but anyway, Villa Creek, which I love, been there a few times. Wines are amazing, and I don't think they're, it's one of those things where you can pay more for the scores type of thing, but they're just fantastic. 18 James Barry. There's 13 James Barry. There's 13 Avenger. I think that's it for new picks this week for Villa Creek. But there's also, we were mentioning the Turtle Rock wines. There's a whole bunch of them.
Please don't mention all the Turtle Rock wines that you're watching.
I'm not going to.
Suffice it to say, you can go look for Turtle Rock. There's really good prices.
You will find many. And I can't speak to them because I've never actually tasted Turtle Rock wines. But they got a lot of really high scores across the board, and the prices are not, they're not that shy. Now, it is kind of funny because I noticed there's like a 19 Claude's Cuvée that's got multiple bids on it and high scores at 56, but then there's like the 14 G2 at 60 and no bids on it with also really high scores. So it looks like, some of them are more sought after than others. 18 G2 has bids at 60, also really high scores, but the 14 doesn't. So go figure. Anyway, there's a ton of those. I saw there's some Tablas Creek that snuck in this week. I love
Tablas Creek.
Yeah, I thought you would probably see those. And what else? There's a bunch of there's more Booker, there's more Saxum, and there's Law Estates as well, which you don't always find. That was kind of a really small sought after mailing list wine for a while. Now it pops up at auction. I believe it goes for less than it does at the winery. But yeah, just a lot of Paso Robles wines in this week.
We're running out of time here.
Yeah.
I want to really quickly touch on Italy and other stuff because there was like a ton of really interesting Italian wine that came into auction this week. Barolos and Brunellos especially. I got like a Gaia. There were a couple of Gaias. There was a Cito Moresco 11 for $60, which I thought great price for Gaia. There was the Langhe Sori Tildine. That one, even at $245, already has a bid on it. That one it goes for much higher prices, even on release. I think it's like $500 on release. But that one, great price.
Right.
And then we've got GD Vajra, Barolo Rivera. That one $85 for 2010. Again, 12 years of age, great tasting notes. I'll bet you that Barolo could probably even go further. There was
I think it's Vira, actually. I gotta check on this. Vira, yeah.
There was a grip of older Brunellos, an 95 Brunello for $45, an 06 Brunello for $45, a 2010 Fratelli Ravello Barolo actually for $35. All these right within their drinking window, good tasting notes recently. So it doesn't seem like they're over the hill. 2001, Silvio Nardi, 45. That one already has a bit on it. Yep. The one that I thought was really interesting, there was and I've not seen this before. You probably have 06 Cantina Tarlano Gewürztraminer from Italy.
Oh, it's so funny you mentioned those. Those were that's one that's one producer where I was hesitant to put into things I wanted to mention because I just love those wines and I feel like they kind of slide under the radar. And yeah, those are awesome.
Sorry.
Awesome wines.
I was
it's so cool. It's all good because the Gewürztraminer is good, but I specifically track the Nova Domus Reserva because the wine is just awesome. It's just awesome. And the Reserva wines that Terlan makes they're just so complex, so fascinating. They're great. So yeah, it's cool that you mentioned that.
I just, anytime I see something like that's off the beaten path, like, and Gewürztraminer especially, I feel like is very subject to terroir. So like to be able to try like a Gewürztraminer from Germany, from Alsace, from the Finger Lakes, from Italy, to me, that's always like a really fun thing to do.
Yeah. And I think I prefer actually Northern Italian Gewürztraminer to Alsatian, but that's just my taste. The volatility. Well, it's something about the volatility in the aromatics can be off-putting in some of the Alsatian Gewürztraminer. It's like jet fuel sometimes. It burns off if you got the time, but Clos-Saint-Huon's a different story. I'll never turn that down, but some of them are pretty intense for me. So can I mention?
Go for it.
While we're talking about rare Italian stuff, there's some standouts this week that I have to bring up. So there's a Foradori Tiraldigo Magnum, which I thought was really cool.
That is really cool.
That. Yeah, I do not see that very often. Foradori obviously has a storied past, but the Magnum of the Tiraldigo, it's the Moray 13 for $90. I thought that was really cool because I don't think I've ever seen that in large format. There is a 2010 Gallardi Terra di Lavoro from Roccamonfina volcano, from the volcano of Roccamonfina. It's apparently Campagna's first cult wine. It's great stuff. So you don't see that very often. So I was excited to see that come up. The label's a little shredded, so it might take a minute or two to sell, but we'll see. It's at $80. There's a very interesting wine called Il Cabrolo, which is actually the variety. I always thought it was just the brand name for this wine, but it's not. It's actually a grape, and it's only bottled in Magnum, as far as I know, from Il Carnasciale. This it's a hillside. It's a hillside vineyard that faces the Arno River in Tuscany, and it's really, really hard to find. Anyway, we've got a couple mags of the 13 at $250. That's really, really cool stuff. It's got giant scores, so people know about it, but in all the same, it's fun to see because we don't see it that often.
Absolutely.
And I think that was about it for Italy this week for me. There's a lot of cool things you mentioned, like the Terlan wines and some of the other wines from from Tuscany. I did notice, speaking of relative value, there's a 2011 Capilano Barbera. The Barolo from Capilano is very, very expensive, 3 figures and up, sometimes $300-400. But there's Barbera right now. It's got a bid. It's at 66. There's 1988 Castello di Rampolla San Marco. I love this wine, and 80s vintages don't come up that often. So that was,
I noted that one. Highly regarded, great price, $115. The tasting notes are saying it's singing right now.
Yeah. So that was really cool to see. There's another very obscure Italian wine. Actually, not even Italian. Excuse me. I'm getting out of the country already, but it's from Slovenia. It borders Italy. It's from Slovenia, and it's got a crazy following. Movia Puro Rosé. This stuff is wild. I believe this might even be one of the bottles that you have to disgorge yourself. So you actually have to do it in a bucket. I've seen this done in restaurants before. It's pretty fascinating.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, it's like they make a wine. Movia is a crazy natural wine producer, skin contact, some wild stuff. But there's the Puro Rosé sparkling wine in right now at $60. And there is a version of this, I think, that's not disgorged, that you're supposed to disgorge yourself when you open it. And it's very cool. These wines also have quite a following too. So that was really neat to see.
Speaking of outside Italy, a ton of Grange came into auction this week.
Yeah, I noticed that.
There was a bunch of Grange, including an 81 Grange, $500, which, by the way, is less than you'll pay for Grange at retail today on release.
That's true.
Even we talk about this all the time. Costco selling Grange for $600 a bottle, $500. This and 81 was a fantastic year for Grange, amongst other things. It really, really great deal. A lot of, at least a number of Vega Sicilia Unico came into auction this week. There's an 82 at $575.
I tagged those as well. And
then I saw from Argentina, Argentina Gran Enemigo Cabernet Franc. This one I thought was really interesting because I had heard, I was trying to validate this. So the 2019 of this got 100 points from Robert Parker. This is the 2010, so it's got some age on it. But I have not had Cabernet Franc from Argentina or South America for that matter. I thought it'd be super interesting to try. There was a 01 Bodegas Muga Rioja Reserva, which I love. Bodegas Muga Rioja. This is a producer that I absolutely love. $55. It already has a bid on it, but that's a favorite producer of mine. So those were the big ones. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap things up?
Let me just run through because there were some kind of wild examples from all over the map literally this week. And one I wanted to mention was Alheit. It's South African and it's called Radio Lazarus. It's 100% Chenin Blanc. I looked it up because I'd never heard of it and it popped up and it was kind of expensive. I was like, what's this expensive Chenin Blanc from South Africa doing? I believe it is $70 reserve. So that was pretty wild to see. That came in this week. And it's looks like the winery or some of the vineyards are about an hour and a half from Cape Town. I had to look up on the map because I had no idea what it was about, but they produce pretty much all white wines, or Chris Alheit, I should say, produces all white wines. I don't think there are many reds. There's one red, but anyway, we have the Chenin Blanc in this week. There is also a wine from the Canary Islands, which is really cool. Envinate Taganon Blanc. Taganon, which apparently is made of a bunch of varieties that I had not heard of except for Malvasia. There's Listan Blanco, Albio Criollo, Marmajuelo, and Gual, in case you were curious. I had to look it up because I was like, dude, this is wild. It's from Tenerife. So anyway, that was really neat to see. And then there is also these wines. There's a wine, 2015 Alvaro Castro Palhada Primus, which is from Portugal. So another really interesting field blend from Portugal, white wine. It looked like it's also had, some pretty good scores on it and a following as well. So that was neat to see. It's got bids on it as well. I think it's actually rather expensive at retail and it started at 35 and it's got a couple bids. So not surprising there. And then let's see. And I think, that was about it. There were a couple cult wines from California, if you will, that I did want to mention. Some, younger producer, shall we say, that aren't as well known but have a major following. There's a 19 Arrow and Branch Vine Hill Ranch Cabernet, serious source from Oakville. There's a 2018 Bella Oaks Vineyard Red, and Bella Oaks Vineyard was bought by somebody, I think, quite a few years ago, but then the whole place has been revamped and it's very, very expensive now, but we have a bottle of the 18 in for $280. I thought that was kind of cool to see. And let's see, there's some Kinsman Eads wine in this week, which we don't often see. More of the classics, by the way, if we skip back to Calistoga and classic wine, there's 1991 Chateau Montelena Estate, which is, again, I talked about 91 Dominus. The 91 Montelena is again, one of the best bottles of Cabernet I've ever had. Really, really, really good wine. So that was cool. There's also magnums of the 92 350 and the 93 at 210, which seems pretty reasonable. I mean, not the same as 91, but still, it's fun to see those in large formats. Okay, skipping back to Spain. Sorry, forgive me for jumping all over the place, but there's a wine called Comando J Rumbo Al Norte Garnacha. So it's Grenache from, I don't even know what part of Spain, but very, very, very obscure, rare stuff, $300 reserve, big high scores. I'd never noticed it, but that'll be interesting to see if people go after it or not. It does seem like a pretty high score, or excuse me, a pretty high reserve, but still, we'll see what happens there. And speaking of classic California, bouncing back to Napa, there's a Magnum of 94 Duckhorn 3 Palms, which I thought was cool. 3 Palms Merlot, excuse me, for $90. That's a great, great, great vineyard source. It's one of the best Merlot sources, I think, in Napa, up near Calistoga, if not in the Calistoga appellation.
$90 is very reasonable.
Yeah. Back to cult wines, if you will. 19 Fairchild Stones Longitude Latitude. I'd never seen these wines before. Also Chardonnay from Pararis Block A3 from Fairchild. The 19 Longitude Latitude is 350 and the Chardonnay is 205. Crazy bottles too. If you look at the glass, it's really kind of a trip. The Fairchild Cabernets have always been expensive since release, but I noticed these wines because I hadn't really seen them before and they were new this week. So I thought that was kind of cool to see. And then skipping back to Piedmont, if you will, the 16 Giacomo Conterno, Cascina Francia Barolo. I always like to mention these. Prices have gone crazy in the last few years. Those are at $285. There's a couple of those. There's Giuseppe Mascarello Barbera and the Monprivado Barolo as well. The 07 Monprivados at $205, and obviously the Barberas are a lot more reasonable. There's a 17 Barbera d'Alba Scudetto at $35 and Barbera d'Alba Codamonte at $60. Those are always interesting to see because they're such great wines. 15 Donhoff snuck in this week as well. Spätlese, Norheimer Kirschek Spätlese at 40. Got a couple of those.
I love being able to correct you on something.
Spätlese, yeah, excuse me.
Spätlese.
You mentioned Inglenook, actually. I wanted to point out there's an 18 Inglenook in at 3 of them actually at 65. I think the new releases of this wine are awesome and they're built to last. They're tannic and massive. And, again, if scores matter, they got big scores too. But for a classic source in Napa, and I think wines are being made in a great way these days. 65 wasn't bad. I briefly mentioned Kinsman Eads because the winemaker Nigel Kinsman is also responsible for a couple of other wines in the current auction. There's some Memento Mori, Vine Hill Ranch again in Oakville, 18 at $215. Oh, skipping back over to Italy. I'm sort of going alphabetically here if you didn't notice, but Miani wines, which I always like to point out because they are rare and collectible, but it's fun to see them come in. There's the Friulano 17 at 80, and then the Friulano Buri at 105 for the 16. Then there's the Miani Rosso 2010 at 170. There's a couple bottles of the Montevertine Rosso, the 17 and the 18. I think the 17's already got bids. The 18's at 70. And there's some really cool Myriad, 15, 16, and 18. There's Dr. Crane from all 3 vintages, 190, 265, and 215, respectively. 2010 Palabea, always cool to see Palabea wines. We talked about Movia a minute ago. So there's a Bea Rosso San Valentino, not the top tier wine, but still fun to see from 2010 at 55. Not a crazy price. There's a ton of Peter Michael in this week. We were talking about how
I saw that.
There's a lot of really, crazy cult California, but I love that Au Paradis Cabernet. It's an Oakville source. It's really, really good. There's a lot of that. I'm pretty sure it's less than winery cost. There's 11, there's 12, 17, 18. I think there's other vintages. Also Magnums of the Chardonnay, the Cuvée Indigène, which is just great wine, lasts forever. There's 07 and 09 mags, 230, 220 respectively. 05 Mon Plaisir Chardonnay Magnum at 160. Again, really, really great wine. So anyway, there was one other California wanted to mention because it comes from the controversial 2020 vintage, the terrible fire vintage. Aaron Pott, as always, likes to buck the trend, whatever it may be. He's kind of an amazing character in Napa, but he put out a wine called Smoke, Smoke Pot, as it were. Lots of puns there. He's always been interested in Latin and puns and all kinds of things, but I've never seen this wine before. Obviously, it's a new release, but there are 2 bottles of the 2020 at 75. You can take your risk with that wine to see if it has any smoke taint. Hopefully it doesn't, but you never know. I think that about wraps it up for all my picks. I've got other stuff too, but it's good.
We'll put them in the show notes. What is yours? Somebody's going to find out if it has any smoke taint. Look, thank you for all of that wonderful analysis, Paul. I think that's been enough for us. We're tapping out here.
Yeah.
Everyone, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy it. Have a happy holidays, all that fun stuff, and happy hunting when it comes to your wine auctions. Cheers.
Exactly. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.